Go. Hello, my name is Teri Dameron. I'm Oglala Lakota, living in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm also an entrepreneur for the last 8 years, and I've looked at several issues that are impacting tribal communities. And one of the key things, a very key core value of my business has been to make sure that whatever work I do is not about me, but about the tribe. And the only way I can make program development work or grant writing successful or empowering tribal community members or tribal leaders is to understand what their needs are as identified by them. So today what I want to share with you is some information about collecting data from tribal communities and some of the lessons I've learned in the last several years. This picture to me depicts exactly what my experience has been in tribal communities. This picture is one that I took in a field with buffalo. The buffalo herd manager took us right out into the field. And what happened was all the soldiers, if you will, lined up to protect the baby at the end and his mama. And to me, that's what you experience when you collect data in tribal communities. You will have a line of protectors before you get to the baby. And those line of protectors are there for lots of reasons. Historical trauma, the amount of distrust in our tribal communities, experiences of our tribal leaders with surveyors and researchers. So you have to understand that when you enter into collecting any kind of data in a tribal community, the trust element is very, very important to address. And just know that this is normal, that this is right. This is a normal response to people wanting to collect information about the tribal community. So I want to talk a little bit about the lessons that I've learned. So, survey or data, I'll use those terms interchangeably throughout our discussion today or my presentation. I wish it was a discussion. I am so grateful for this opportunity to do this for you, but I know I would love to have some live bodies receiving this information. I do thank my granddaughter, my Takhoja Talia, for being my videographer in this. She's become quite essential in getting this done. So thank you, Talia. All right, so survey data collection, and what I like to base my collection of data on is to plan for a community. So number one, I have to recognize that there will be or could be a tribal review board. So a TRB means that a tribe has established an entity to review research and methodologies that are going to be conducted within their jurisdiction. That's an awesome, empowered approach to data collection for tribal communities. However, not all tribes have that capacity. And so in those cases, you'll have to have an institutional review board to approve the data collection that you intend to do. Oftentimes, the data that I collect is all about opinion, and it's not anything personal, or it's not going to trigger an institutional review board or a tribal review board, because it's more of an opinion based, not a data collection where I'm checking people's blood temperatures or blood types or disease types or whatever. So that's important. To develop the trust, you must acknowledge that tribal review board or institutional review board process. The other important level of dealing with those soldiers that have lined up protecting that data is to get the leadership's, not only their input, but their approval. That you should have a resolution that allows your collection of data. a resolution from the tribal council or a letter of at minimum, an email saying it's okay. But typically, my experience is you present what you're going to collect, and then you get approval before you collect it. And then to me, one of the most important pieces when you're doing any kind of data collection in a tribal community is that you have a team. I call it a planning team because usually that's what I'm collecting data for, is to develop a plan. Your team is going to be multifaceted, hopefully. You'll have everything from maybe a professor to a service provider to a tribal leader. Whomever you can get. You want a very comprehensive team that best helps you think of all the angles in your data collection process. So one of the experiences I was able to embark upon, I've done a few community planning experiences, comprehensive planning experiences, but I would say that the most important element of any of them that I've done is it has to all be about empowerment. It has to be you're collecting data to empower the people, whether it's the leadership, whether it's the tribal members, whether it's the actual tribal nation itself, or if it's empowering a staff member to better do their job or better fulfill the needs of the community or whatever it may be. And so I think when I've done data collecting with tribal communities, those are the questions I want to get input on. Those are your initial research, where you're identifying who needs to be at the table in this planning process and what do they want from a planning process. So when it comes time to collect the data, we have to be careful of survey burnout. Our tribal communities, because they work in silos as a intergenerational and historically traumatized group, we don't have groups that work well together. They could, but that hasn't been encouraged because everybody's oftentimes they're challenged to share information with another group, or somebody's relative is in that other group that they don't like, or family issues or enemy issues keeps us from working together. And so you have all these silos, and what happens is survey burnout, because each of those silos usually have to collect some kind of information from their constituency. So they get surveyed to death, if you will. And so it's important that you work as best that you can at breaking down those silos to collect the data, so that you can do one survey or one data collection tool that will get at a vast majority of what's going on. So it's important to use that team approach to make sure they can pull in as many partners in the process as possible. Even for research, I know I'm talking about surveys for community planning, but if you're intrigued as I was about research and looking and finding out what makes us work the way that we do in tribal communities, or whatever you might be interested in researching, it's still important to have a team that is comprised of not just professional, instructional, institutional-minded folks, but also those folks that understand your community and can integrate those cultural components and that knowledge of the community into your research project. So, number one, I find a team, and I work with at least 5 folks from that tribe to develop the survey. The most important thing I have found, and it's interesting how this works out, but is that your options, number one, the first survey I did had open-ended questions. Tell me what you think are the 5 top needed services. Tell me blah, blah, blah. And it was all essay, if you will. And if you have ever taught a class where you can do multiple choice or essays and grade them, trust me, you want to do multiple choice, right? You're going to get some great information in the in the essays. I get it. But number one, people are not always communicating well in writing. Number two, it's very hard to aggregate the data when it's all that kind of information. You need to shut it down.